So you know what a scatter plot is, and you have to make a line of best fit. And if you want to do this by hand, really making the line of best fit is the easy part. It's coming with the equation. That's going to be you remembering how to make an equation from the graph of a line. And, there's videos for you to look back on if you need to see more of that. I'm just going to give you kind of an overview. So you want to put a line in here that goes with the dots, and you keep it right in the middle of the dots. I don't have a ruler ability on this program, so you're just going to have to bear with me here. But please, when you do this by hand, use a ruler or the edge of your paper or something to make sure that you have a very good straight line, unlike what I'm about to do. And so I'm going to put a line in here that goes through, and I don't know why, but it's really having a hard time graphing or drawing, sorry. So bear with me here. All right, so there's my line. So you'll notice that as you look at this, I have all these dots above and I have these dots below. So it's about the same number above the line as I have below the line. I also have the dots are going up in this direction, and that's the direction that I have my line going. I didn't put the line like this. Okay, I went with the dots. Okay, now the really important part, the part that I really want to make sure that you get by watching this video, is you have to come up with an equation for this line. And so what you're doing is you're looking at your line and you're trying to figure out where does your line cross the grid. So you know all those blue dots that were our data? Those dots don't matter anymore. Those are pretty much done because I don't need them anymore because I have the line. And so I'm not trying to find the equation of the dots. I'm trying to find the equation of the line. So now I'm looking for when does this line cross the grid. So for example, here's a spot where it's pretty close to crossing the grid. It doesn't have to cross exactly. You just want something that's pretty close. Here's another spot where it's pretty close to crossing the grid. Notice I'm not paying attention to the blue spots, the blue dots. I don't care about that. For example, the line is almost on this blue dot right here, but I really don't care about that. The pen is just not working with this background. I really don't care about the blue dots there. I just care where it's crossing the line. And so then, once I find where it crosses twice, I need to come up with the points for that. What points do they cross at? And so for this top one here, the x value is 4, the y value is 3. And for the one that's in the third quadrant there, I'm going to have to change the background, I think. For the one that's in the third quadrant there, the x value is -1 and the y value is -1. So these are the points that I'm going to be working with. Okay, I'm very frustrated with that, so I will have to change the background on the next slide. So I'm going to go to the next slide and start from scratch with these 2 points and come up with the equation. So we're going to go ahead and find our equation. We really don't need the graph for this because we have the 2 points of the line that we graphed. So I don't need any more information from the graph that we had. I have other videos that go in this more detail. I'm just going to go through this somewhat quickly on how to find the equation from 2 points. So I have my points 4, 3, and then -1, -1, and I'm going to go ahead and find the slope of this. So to go from 3 to -1, I would subtract 4. And to go from 4 to -1, I would subtract 5. And this is going to be my slope when I put the y value over the x value. And so that gives me 4/5. Now, here's the good news. See, normally I make you work with fractions and keep them as fractions, but when you have scatter plot, the numbers aren't necessarily going to work out very nicely for you. And so this is, I'm going to allow you to turn this into a decimal. And so you go ahead and use a calculator. 4 divided by 5 is going to give you 0.8. And that is going to be our slope. Slope is always your y, change in y divided by change in x. If you're not comfortable with this table that I made, you can always put that in a fraction, of y minus y over x minus x. You should get the same thing as I did. And then we have the equation of a line, and it is time now to plug in what we know, and I know that my slope is 0.8, so that's what m is. And then I need to figure out what b is. And so I take one of our points and I plug it in for x and y. so that I can get rid of all these variables and have just one variable to solve for. It's our temporary solution. Go ahead and do the math. So I'm going to multiply 0.8 times negative 1, so it's negative 0.8. Then I have to solve for b, so I'm going to add 0.8 to both sides. So then b equals negative 0.2, and that's my y-intercept. And so then I go back to my equation and write it out as it is. So I remember my slope I had found before was 0.8. And then now my y-intercept is negative 0.2. So this is the equation of my line that fit the data. And you always want to look at it and look at this number right here and make sure that it actually looks like it's crossing the graph right there. And then pay attention to this too. It's a positive slope, so my dots should be going up. I should have a positive slope on the line. So double check all of those things. Don't just take your answer for granted. It's easy to make mistakes somewhere in here. In fact, what you don't know is I actually had to redo this whole problem because at the very beginning I had wrote down a negative 3 instead of a positive 3, and so I totally messed it up and had to start over. But the reason I figured that out was because this number was like negative 1.4, and when I looked at the graph again, it was nowhere near that. So you know, it might not be exactly where you think it's going to be because, you know, you have your line that you drew and it depends on how good it is, and especially if you don't use a straight edge. But you want to check that because it can really help keep you from making mistakes.